الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Like was mentioned in the Jummah khutbah, we want to look at Quran and the role it can play in our lives today. And what I will be saying is somewhat different from what others say with regard to the Quran. We have a particular approach to the Quran in this day and age, which is different from the approach that existed in the 50s or the 20s or the 18th century and so on. So if some of you are old enough to go back to 1950 and even go back to your countries of origin, and you will remember that your approach to the Quran was different than it is today. And I want to take you back there actually, to the old approach with a few modifications. And my reason for doing so is because of what we spoke of today with regard to the LGBT challenge. Well, let me begin by saying that some challenges are overcome immediately, some take a few years, some take centuries. So the fact that we are in a challenge today in coming to terms with this new culture doesn't mean, for one, that this is the first time we have a challenge like this. Nor does it mean that the solution to that challenge will be found today. Nor does it mean that no solution will ever be found. None of this applies. But if you put yourself front and center, then you might find that all of this escapes you. So when Muslims faced the challenge of the breakdown of its political authority, let's just say, when Muslims faced the breakdown of the Khilafah in 1922-24, you and I, who were not witness to that, and I don't think anyone alive today was actually witness that, even if you were so young that you wouldn't recall the trauma you experienced when the Khilafah collapsed. You and I are in the unfortunate position, some of us, of having lost a parent or both. And there's a certain tragedy that's attached to that. It's a painful experience. It's a painful experience, especially if they're taken away at an inopportune time, by which I mean in their 50s as opposed to their 80s. Because we have certain expectations that you're more likely to go at the age of 80 than you are at the age of 50, and so on. So that trauma that you experience, you can multiply 100 times over to get some kind of sense of what it meant for Muslims in the 20s to lose their Khilafah. You and I live in a world wherein there is no Khilafah. And we're doing pretty well. For them, Qiyamah had come. The people of India were so traumatized by this collapse that they formed an organization called the Khilafat movement. And the Khilafat movement had multiple purposes. But the one purpose that it served was to give them some kind of a crutch. You know, when you break your leg, you need a crutch. So they needed a crutch until their leg healed. It's like their roof fell off or flew off. It's one thing to live in a world where you believe that the Khalifa in Istanbul, whom you've never seen, nor has he ever visited you in Hyderabad or in Lahore, but his shadow is over you. And suddenly the shadow is taken away from you. So there was enormous pain at that time. We overcame that. Our entire landscape changed. We moved from being a single ummah to being nation and states. New countries came into existence, Lebanon and Algeria and so on. And now the people no longer remember life under a Khilafah. So what I'm telling you is that your experience today of not having a ready-made answer to the challenges we face is your experience. And inshallah, Islam will have an answer to it. Perhaps not in my lifetime. Because these answers sometimes take a while to develop. Until we got, if I ask you now, what is the basis of Islamic law? You will tell me just like that, it is Quran, Hadith, Qiyas, and Ijma. These are the four basic elements, the building blocks of Islamic law. It took the early scholars decades to come to that conclusion. So how could they not know that? How could they not know something as basic as that? Simply because something as basic as that had not actually developed as an idea. That idea had to be found by looking backward. This is when Rasulullah did this, when Abu Bakr did that, when Umar did that, when Ali did that, what were they doing? What were they doing? And so incrementally, the idea developed that Quranic Islamic law is based on these four pillars. It took a while, and we take that for granted. So in the same way, what we today consider a crisis, and it is a crisis, because we don't have an adequate answer to the challenges we face. I've been teaching classes for many, many years, decades now. This is the first time I come across students who come to me and says, I have a sister who is, They want an answer. And the answer is complicated. It's not as simple, it's haram, tell her to get rid of it. Because everything she would argue in response is all the arguments you hear on TV. If you take a class, it's the argument in there. If you listen to the news media, it's a complicated, intertwined argument. You have to cut through that. So these are challenging times. And during such times, what happens is the individual himself gets caught up in a tornado. He gets blasted from all sides. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he warned us about this. He says, when times become intolerable, then you should go into your house and lock your door. Because you and I cannot, some of us are strong enough to take a 50 miles per hour wind. Some maybe 60. Some will collapse at 10. So what do you do in such a case? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, in times of crisis, when life outside becomes intolerable, restrict your ambit. That's what he was saying in other words. Go into your house, close your door, and wait for the storm to pass. Obviously, he was not talking about a geological storm. He was talking about a catastrophic moment in the history of the community. He says, wait a week, 2 weeks, even a year, until that storm passes. Because we don't want the storm to take you. So this is that, when I speak about therapy, it is that remedy we need, or it is that crutch that we need in this modern age, where the truth is no longer the truth, where morality is no longer morality, when spirituality no longer exists, except in your heart. Except in your heart. except in her heart. How do we protect that which is in his heart and his heart and her heart? We do so by returning to the Quran. That is clear. But not in the way in which we are schooled, initiated, indoctrinated. That's important. You see, when you live in the modern world, it matters not who you are. There are exceptions, but for the most part, when you go to school, a modern school, particularly in the West, but even in Pakistan and Malaysia, you're taught to think in a particular way. You're taught to think in a particular way. Your entire approach to life is a combination of empirical and rational. You can't be an engineer, a scientist, or a doctor without being empirical and rational. When you say you're empirical, you say, show me the evidence. Everything you and I do in this world today is based on, show me the evidence. Show me the evidence. It's the building block of your educational system. It's what that child is being groomed to embrace. When they go to kindergarten, they're being taught to think in this way. And everything must make sense. There must be a particular pattern to it. There must be a logic to it. That's having a rational approach to things. So we are products of this mindset, every one of us. You're just not aware of it, maybe. Well, some of you, perhaps you know about this as much as I do, even more maybe. But most people are not aware that when they think, they're thinking in a particular way, which was not the way in which people taught 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, and so on. So your pattern of thinking has changed. That's number one. Number two is that in the entire Muslim world itself, the approach to the Quran itself changed. As a result of these two approaches, the approach to the Quran has changed. So let's go back to 50 years ago. The Quran was an Arabic document which you recited for devotional purposes every day, perhaps after Fajr, Surah Yasin maybe, and certainly when someone died. In other words, you were not encouraged to actually go into the meaning of the Quran. And then you got schooled into a Western educational system. Your approach to everything in life changed, and therefore your approach to the Quran also changed. Now you want to understand. So if you look at the number of translations that existed in 1910, for instance, you'd find there are probably about, I'm taking a guess here, 15. And if you look at the translations today, 150, if not more. All of that points to this whole idea of the need for the Muslim to understand the Quran, which is a good thing, which is a very good thing that you understand the Quran. But if you reduce the Quran to a document that is only understood, this is my point. If you reduce the Quran to a document that is only understood, then you have taken away from yourself, as at a personal level, you're robbing yourself of one of its key elements, which is its therapeutic value, of what it does to your mind and your soul. For that, you require a different approach. And in this modern age, where rationality is dominant, almost asphyxiating, there is no place for anything that is not rational. So therefore, you'd find, if he says, I'm reading the Quran in Arabic, say, do you understand Arabic? No, I don't. You say, what's the point? How can you approach a text if you don't understand it? And that is true. But if every encounter with the Quran, this is my point, if every encounter with the Quran is an encounter to only understand, then you're missing the point. Then you're missing the point. In other words, what I'm saying that in this storm that is outside there, your individual personal approach to the Quran is not one of understanding, but one of feeling. It is not one of understanding, it is one of feeling. It should be like the oxygen that you breathe in, that goes into your nostrils, into your lungs, into your blood, travels throughout your body, and reaches all your extremities. The understanding approach doesn't do that. Where do you think that stops? It stops inside your brain, because the entire approach is rational. But if you start absorbing the Quran and pay attention to those verses that speak in that way, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I think in Surah Al-Isra, وَنُنَزِّلُ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلَا يَزِيدُ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. And we send down of the Quran that which is therapeutic and a mercy unto believers. And as for the disbelievers, they are in a state of loss. Certainly you can make the argument that here too the Quran is asking you to understand it. But above and beyond that, it is telling you that if you pay attention to me in this particular way, I am therapeutic. I can heal you. I can heal you. I can protect you. I can enclothe you. I can cover you. I can give you the temporary relief that you want. I am the dhikr. I am the dhikr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in another place of the Quran, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ. It is through the remembrance of Allah that the hearts find contentment. It is in the remembrance of Allah that the heart finds contentment. My humble suggestion to you is that this remembrance is not a rational remembrance. This is a physical remembrance that includes your mind, your body, your tongue, your voice, your breath, the ones that you take in when you read and the one that you leave out. In all of that is the dhikr. This is the dhikr that gives you that itminan. Until, inshallah, there is a solution to this challenge we face today. That's why I called it earlier on, this is a resting place. You need, as an individual, you need a resting place where it is so uncomfortable out there. Where do I find this kind of itminan? So Allah says, in the dhikr of Allah is itminan. And the greatest dhikr is the Quran. You say Allahu Akbar, that is dhikr. La ilaha illallah, that too is dhikr. But there is no dhikr on the face of this earth that is greater than the Quran. There is no dhikr on the face of this earth that is greater than the Quran. This requires that old traditional approach to the Quran, where you simply recite. And when the Quran talks to you, tells you to get involved, it doesn't tell you to read only. It certainly says iqra, but it also says rattil. It says iqra, but it also says rattil. We're caught up in the iqra mode. Read to understand. Read to understand. And the same Quran is telling you to chant the Quran. To chant it. If you've ever taken part in a dhikr session, you know what I'm talking about. When everybody gets together and recite a certain dhikr, it does something to you. It changes you. He says, so you recite so that it has an impact on you, on your soul, on your psyche. And when you recite, you're not reading. When you're reading, your mind is involved. When you're reciting, your voice is involved. You have to listen to what you're saying. You have to listen to what you're saying. And if you don't read well, that's embarrassing. Let me assure you, whether it's Hafiz Rabbani or Imam Layla or anyone else, everybody started reading in a very embarrassing way. Everyone started reading in an embarrassing way. It takes a while. Even if you're born Arab, knowing Arabic and speaking Arabic and reciting the Quran, not the same things. Obviously, you have a big advantage over someone who doesn't know Arabic at all. But there are a whole set of rules called tajweed that have to do only with the Quran. So my message to you is that you certainly want to know the Quran and the meaning of it. But you don't have to do that every day. I would suggest that you spend one moment in your life going through the Quran, cover to cover, as a mental exercise, to get some kind of idea what it is. Make notes. If you have a Quran, keep one for yourself and make notes on it, that this particular section deals with the Banu Israel. And when you've done that, you've done with it. You have an overview of what the Quran is. You have an overview of what the Quran is. Or find books that tell you about the major themes in the Quran. There's a book called The Major Themes of the Quran by Fazlur Rahman. So when you read that book, it gives you an idea of, well, this Quran has 8 major themes, for instance, or 12 major themes. Get something like that and read it. When you're done with it, you're done. You know what it is. But your everyday entry into the Quran is to recite, to get your tongue involved, to get your voice involved, to get your breath involved, to get your heart involved. It's a slow process, but inshallah your recitation will improve, your mental condition will improve, and you will feel so much better. Again, I am not against understanding the meaning of the Quran. And many of our great scholars have spoken about the importance to understand the meaning of the Quran. But I sometimes get the sense that in encouraging people to get the meaning of the Quran, they fail to emphasize the equally important recitation of the Quran, tartil of the Quran. And the Quran tells you must recite the Quran in a melodious voice. That's a fascinating thing about the Quran. No matter how tone deaf you are, I guarantee you this. You start off today and you cannot recite the Quran with melody, but you recite it every day and you increase your recitation every day, Allah puts a melody into your voice. Your voice becomes naturally melodious. Not everyone is born reciting like Abdul Basit. Not everyone is born that way. I had a teacher who was such a great Quran reciter that he was given the honor of leading the Maghrib Salah, and he's a South African, in the Haram. But he had no melody. His entire recitation was just flat, totally flat. But if you listen to him, he captivates your heart. He grabs you. He sucks you in, and you're forced to listen. So the fact that you don't have melody means that it will come to you. The fact that you cannot recite the Quran today means that you have to start today. It pains me to see, on the one hand, I'm happy that people are still continuing with the tradition. I thought this is there's a special Hyderabadi term for it. I forgot to see the Hyderabadis don't invite me to their homes anymore. So anyway, when the Quran is done, what do they call that? When the child is finished reading the Quran. Bismillah, there we go. Is that the Bismillah? And at the end? Ameen, there we have it. This is an Ameen festival. You can go anywhere in the world, nobody knows what an Ameen festival is. It's an Ameen, it's a great thing. And that comes about after much effort. But it's the effort that the teacher puts on the child. The parent will be walking past that child every day. Every day they'll look. Hafiz Saab is coming now, get ready. It would never occur to that parent, that I should be sitting here as well. I should be sitting here as well. Because getting the recitation right is as important for me as it is for that child. And if I sit quietly at the back and simply listen to this child being taught, I'm getting 2 for the price of 1. So when I'm talking to you, I'm not talking to your children. I'm talking to you as an individual. I'm talking to you as someone who is buffeted by the world outside. Someone who wants to hold on to something that is strong. Hablullah. And this is the Hablullah, the robe of Allah. But for that, you have to make your own effort. It's the old traditional effort of learning to recite the Quran properly. And then learning to read it with tajweed. And then making and creating a discipline, a regimen that you will recite it every day. If you're reciting it one page every day, every Ramadan you make an effort to double that. That if I'm reciting every day 1 page for the last 1 year, come Ramadan, I'm going to start reading 2 pages. There's something amazing about time. There is always enough time. Always enough time. You have to know how to economize it. You have to know how to manage it. If you manage your time correctly, then the B word comes into it, barakah. And what was impossible yesterday becomes possible today. There was this I spoke to you about us reaching a point in our history where we were able to understand what the basics of Islamic laws. One of the people who played a key role in that was a man called Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, Imam al-Shafi'i. Imam al-Shafi'i was involved in so many things. He was involved in so much. What I'm going to tell you is just mind-boggling, that someone who did so much was able to recite 1 whole Quran every day. 1 whole Quran every day. And that, in my humble opinion, is because of the barakah that he found in his time. So if you make the niyyah today that I will set aside an X amount of time learning the Arabic if I don't know the Arabic, learning to recite if I don't know how to recite, learning the tajweed if I don't know the tajweed, memorizing if I haven't memorized enough, you should embrace it entirely and totally. You have time for everything else. You should make time for this. You have time for everything else. You should make time for this. You should make time for this. I know people who make time for recitation in the most awkward of places. So I was flying one day, and I was in Chicago. And there was a man standing on the one side with a battered bag, leather bag, and waiting. The flight was delayed. And nothing frustrates us and pushes up our blood pressure like a delayed flight, right? Nothing. And he was standing there and reciting the Quran. It was a tough job for him. Extremely difficult for the man. I'll tell you why, and you'll agree. He was African American. He was African American. He started to read the Quran in the Arabic much, much, much late in his life. But of all the people there, the only one who was not bothered by the delay was him, because he found time to do what now? To recite the Quran standing in line. W.D. Muhammad. Wallace Muhammad, remember him? Passed away. Elijah Muhammad's son. The one who brought the entire nation towards Islam, standing there alone, reciting the Quran. Because the flight was delayed. He says, I can stew now, steam, get angry, look at my time, or I can do something that is fruitful, worthwhile, energizing. So let us understand that our relationship with the Quran is personal. Maulana Maududi's relationship was not personal. He certainly had a personal relationship, but he was looking to answers for the community at large. Dr. Israr Ahmad had a personal relationship, but he also had a global attitude to the Quran. So when he looked at the Quran, he was looking for solutions outside there. If you're part of that group, mashallah. If not, you're still the average Muslim who has to develop a personal relationship with the Quran. And in your case, it is not the iqra that is so much important as the rattil. It is not reading with understanding as much, it is reading so that it enters your body and becomes part of your every cell. That is a different approach to it. It's more than just mental. It is spiritual, psychological, and mental. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. If you have any questions, comments, please make them. Whenever you talk,
our function is to listen, understand, absorb. So when I approach Quran, I do the same thing, that our talker is Allah. Whatever is the Quran is what? So I'm reading the approach that I'm in front of Allah. My purpose is to understand what He is saying and to absorb it. That way I can get the feeling in my heart. Correct?
yeah. It's hard to do that though.
Very hard.
It's hard to do that. I just want them to read the Quran for now, or to learn the Arabic for now. But it's hard to you can start a conversation with Allah, and the Quran in some places makes it very easy. It's hard to sustain that, because your mind, you start losing concentration. But that's all part of recitation. Before you know it, you've finished half a juz, astaghfirullah, I didn't pay any attention to it. In terms of understanding what the Quran is saying, you would be amazed. I guarantee you this, that even if you don't understand a word of Arabic, you hold on to it and you keep reading it, it starts speaking to you. I guarantee you that. It will speak to you. It will speak to you. When someone recites a verse of the Quran, you will have some idea what he's saying. You will have, because it's speaking back to you. There is an i'jaz in the Quran. The Quran is a miracle. You must allow it to actually do that to you. It will. It will amaze you by its miraculousness. But you have to open yourself up to it. Sincerity, time, and diligence. You need that. You have to be sincere when you approach it. You have to set aside time, 15 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour, do it every day without fail. Whether your mother dies or it's Eid al-Adha, you will still recite it. And then inshallah you'd find you start reaping those rewards. Anyone else? Loud? You're best equipped to do that. You're best equipped to do that. You understand what he's saying? You can lock the door to the world, but the world still creeps in. It's called the internet. It's called technology. You're best equipped to do that. I don't know the answer to that. Turn it off. There we go.
Everything they approve, is it acceptable, my dear? And if we don't have Islamic education, complete Islamic education, at the junior, senior level, they will always go to those peers, those who are diverting them from the Islamic.
Look, my purpose here is not to ask you to, sell your homes, pack up, and go to some Islamic milieu. I'm giving you a short-term relief. There were times when people just couldn't take it, they moved away. So that may be an option that you can exercise. He cannot exercise it. So what is it that we can do as people living in America with no intent of moving back to wherever we came, not having a place to go back to? Where do African Americans go to, by the way? Where do they go to? Where do white American Muslims go to? They don't have a place to go to. So it's hard to do that. If you have that option and you'd like to exercise it, by all means. But it's not something that the average person can come by easily. What you can do is hold on to the Quran, tie yourself to it, recite it. And there are, mashallah, before I take your question, there are efforts all over the people. People understand this. And I want to tell you that when they engage in that, even if they, for instance, you have this brother announced Salatul Tahajjud. So they read 1, 2, just I don't know. They used to have it when I was Imam, and I just didn't have the strength to do it. I'll be honest with you. It's not easy. If you think Taraweeh is tough, you should try this. People who've been doing this for 10 years, 11 years, or 12 years, however long it is, they swear by it. And I think 80% of those who attend Arabic is not their mother tongue. It's not. But they can't live without it. This is the impact that it has on you. This Quran has been read, recited, and serenaded and celebrated by Muslims who didn't understand the language far more than Muslims who understood the language. It has always been the case. It has always been the case. Muhammad bin Qasim since he went to where? Sindh, remember? From that point onwards, people who listened to the Quran and recited it didn't know its meaning, and yet it had a transformative impact on them. So once again, let me emphasize, at least once in your life, you should go through the Quran cover to cover to understand what is being said in there. But that is different from a devotional approach. A devotional approach, which is simply you reciting it.
Earlier today, in your Jummah khutbah, if I understood your khutbah properly, I got the impression that you said that making us start to believe what is haram is halal and what is halal is haram. It's what is permissible is no longer and vice versa. So, I interpret what you're saying now is that the Quran is our way to be mindful. It's a way to connect to a higher power so we don't get lost in the day-to-day pull of being pulled in a direction that is not good for us. Well, I see Islam through the lens of a parent of 4 children that are living day to day, every minute, where those forces are much stronger. So they connect to music, they connect to lyrics that speak to them and give them that spirituality. So the Quran has to fulfill a void that is there. And how would you recommend, parents to get our kids to connect to the Quran the same way you're recommending that we do when they have these forces in popular culture that pull them in a direction that you're suggesting the Quran should?
Well, let me tell you something that sounds counterintuitive. You start with it, inshallah, your kids will follow. What you're doing right now for the past howsoever long I know the community is you want the kids to do it and you say, inshallah, it'll help you. No. I'm saying you start with this. You turn the Quran, your house, into a house where the Quran is celebrated, recited. And even that in every family there's a kid who's somewhat rebellious. It is when that child is sitting in Pennsylvania, it is when that child is sitting in San Francisco, and that child needs this kind of help, that child will find it. Just by turning on the radio and listening to the Quran, or going to someone who is reciting the Quran. I'm not talking about an answer to a question. Remember, I made that very clear to you. We're not talking about answers to questions. It's gaining that peace and tranquility. Where do I find that? This is a different approach to simply understanding. This is not that rational approach. This is a performative approach. So when you start reciting it, the entire house starts reverberating with it. The child falls in place. We're doing it the other way around, and we shouldn't be doing that. And I think you're giving adhan, right? Yeah, okay, 1 minute. 30 seconds. We all listen to music. All listen to music. Well, there are certainly exceptions, but you know what I'm saying. Nobody actually understands music. You know that? Nobody understands music. I guarantee you that you don't understand music. Music has its own cadence. It has a rhythm. It has a melody. There's a language in which music is written. But does that stop us from enjoying the fruit of music? No. But when it comes to the Quran, he says, if you don't understand it, then what's the point? Well, that's entirely the point. You first start reciting it. Get the recitation right. And inshallah, it will talk to you. Inshallah. Wal-asr. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amilu as-salihat. Wa tawasaw bil-haqqi wa tawasaw bis-sabr.